Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, regulations on the food you eat. But right now I'm sitting on a pillow because I'm talking to this man. Secretary of State Wayne Williams, welcome.
John, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
18 years I've been doing this. Nobody has ever put a pillow under my rear end for a show, except you're like 6'8" or something.
Well, it's in the torso, but it's deceptive. But
great.
Takes a big guy to do what needs to be done sometimes.
I feel like I'm wearing a toupee. This is good. All right. I want to ask you a few things. First of all, I want to get the straight story because I want to know why you're selling my personal private information to a fascist like Trump. And I need you to stop it right away. This is wrong. You have given away voter data to D.C., to the Trump administration. I need you to explain that. I'm very upset.
Yeah, let me explain, because I think it is an important issue for folks to recognize. Colorado has...
For those who don't know, I'm joking. This is the biggest nothing burger I've ever heard of. Go ahead.
Colorado has a specific law that says certain information is public, certain information is private. And anyone can get the public information, and no one can get the private information. The Presidential Advisory Commission asked for the publicly available information, including the following if publicly available. So they had two caveats there, clearly under the law of the state. So you can get the name, the address, the year of birth, but not the date of birth, not the social security number. In fact, for that, they had an extra if available, so they had three caveats to it. So it's the same list that Healthier Colorado got when they were running their initiative for Amendment 69.
For those who might not know, you hold public documents. You hold public records. Some of those records, a lot of the records really, are open for public viewing. In fact, every single campaign gives you a request to get that data that you just gave to the Trump administration. It happens over and over and over again. But because somebody just realized this and it's going to Washington, they had a conniption that you were, how dare you, making public information actually public and doing your job. What would have happened, I ask, if you said no?
Well, if you don't provide someone information that is publicly available.
But even as somebody you don't like.
Even if you don't like them, if you don't provide it within 3 days, you're in violation of the law. I would be in violation of my oath as Secretary of State to follow the laws of the state of Colorado. So there is a specific requirement for open records requirements to give the information, to provide that information, if it's publicly available. And that's exactly what we did. We did not give them any of the private information. We only gave them the public information.
What was your reaction when you heard people were upset about this? I mean, it's just got to be such an amazing mental disconnect of, what?
So, John, I recognize that some folks may not be aware that the information is, that certain information is public. The name, the address, the year of birth. And I recognize that not everyone knows all of the requirements of the law.
That's
but
fair.
We actually
That's
have a
fair.
frequently asked questions link. We had it already on our website that provided the information on that. What bothered me is when people who knew better, people who have, for example,
people in the political realm,
people who have used that exact list for a walking list, for a phone list, for making calls, if you've used that list yourself, and then you say the secretary shouldn't give it to people you disagree with, that's a very dangerous road to go down, where you get into crony favoritism, where the Secretary of State only gives it to people they like to effect a particular agenda, and if you don't agree with me, I don't give you the list. That's a very dangerous thing with public information.
To find out that, I forget how many people then unregistered. It was a few thousand, wasn't it?
It's a few thousand. We actually had more people who registered, though, than deregistered. And it's easy for folks to come back.
It was mostly Democrats who deregistered. So do more of this.
I want everyone to be registered to vote. We actually have, John, the highest percentage of registered voters in the United States of America right here in Colorado.
Really?
We are #1 in the country. In terms of voter turnout, we're in the top 5 every single presidential year. And that's been true for the last 3 presidential elections. So we work hard to make it easy for people to vote, hard for people to cheat. And that's really what the goal of the Secretary of State's office should be in the elections area, which is to make it
I don't know. You following
transparent process
following
and
the law.
follow the law.
Don't following the law. All right, let me ask you about something that's going to be new and never been done, which is next year we're going to have open primaries, which is crazy to me, but the law is the law, and now unaffiliated candidates will be able to vote in any primary that happens. Now, not every party is going to have a primary. For instance, the Libertarians might not. They might do it in their own convention. The Republicans just decided they will. So unaffiliated voters can vote either way. They're going to get 2 ballots. I don't understand this. So they're going to get 2 ballots. I have a feeling you're going to get swamped with people who vote in both the Republican and Democrat, and maybe the Libertarian primary.
So let me give a little bit of the information. Propositions 107 and 108 expanded the ability of unaffiliated voters to vote within a presidential primary and then other types of primaries. Unaffiliated voters always could vote by simply affiliating on the day of the election. They could walk in at 6:59 p.m. right before the polls close, say, hey, for this next 30 seconds, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote. What the initiative did is it changed it so that every unaffiliated voter will be sent both of the major party ballots, and they will have the option to vote in one or the other, but not both. So there's a Supreme Court decision that says illegal for folks to be voting in both of them. It came out of a California blanket primary case. So Colorado's law was written by the proponents to be very carefully crafted so that only votes in one party's primary can be counted for an unaffiliated voter, and if you vote in both, your ballot does not count.
Let me see if I got this. So if I'm a registered Republican, at this point, why bother? You can just be unaffiliated and you get both ballots.
Well,
before this.
So let me answer that question first, because that's an important question that people have wondered. First, to participate in the caucus and assembly process, the process by which over 90% of the candidates get on the ballot, the process that in many jurisdictions will choose the actual person who is the elected official, particularly in areas like Denver that's predominantly Democratic, El Paso that's predominantly Republican. The major election takes place in the caucus and assembly process, so there's still a very good reason to be affiliated and participate.
In the same breath, though, few people ever participate in those caucuses as a percentage of registered voters.
It is a much smaller group that participates, which means your individual voice counts for more.
Fair point. So I'm unaffiliated, let's say. I get these 2 ballots. What if I send one in, because now we have an election month almost instead of an election day, and then a week later I send in the other one? Do you catch both of these?
So what happens anytime a voter sends in multiple ballots? For example, they might have moved and had a replacement sent to them. They might have called up and said, hey, I lost my ballot, can you send me another one? My dog ate it, whatever the case may be. When the ballot is received the first time, there is a barcode on the envelope that is scanned in, and that tells the clerk and our statewide voter registration system that you have turned in your ballot. Anything else that comes in after that does not count.
Okay.
And that's true, if you go from place to place voting on election day, because there's multiple voter service and polling centers, your information that you have voted is already scanned in, and you will not be issued a regular ballot at the next site
then
you
help
go
me
to.
out, because I'm further confused. And so I put in my Republican ballot, you scan it in, I bring in the Democratic ballot a day later, and that one's tossed and the Republican one stays?
Correct. The first one sent. If you send in multiples, the first one that arrives is the one that's reviewed.
All right, so it's not that both of them are now discounted. If they both came in at the same time, one gets scanned before the other one, that first one is counted.
If they come in at the same time, so you voted in both the Republican and Democratic primaries, by the specific wording of the initiative, and frankly by some requirements of the federal Constitution and law, neither ballot is counted if they come in at the same time. I'm talking about the scenario in which we get one first, it's processed, then later on you turn in the other, that second one's not going to count.
This is really technical. What's the definition of the same time? The same day, the same hour, the same minute?
The same envelope that they're being processed. So what
okay.
happens,
All right.
if you return this envelope, it's going to get scanned in. We're going to check to see if you have turned in a vote in this election, whether it was in person or through another mail ballot that you returned. Once that's scanned in, no other one is going to be able to be scanned in for you as a voter. And that's true, you know, if you, for example, are in a jurisdiction that has a 2-page ballot and you turn in the first page, that once that scanned in is being accepted, there is no option to do that again, because what happens is we disassociate the ballot from the envelope, so we don't know what you actually turned in. You don't want the government to know how you voted. Colorado puts that voter secrecy, that voter privacy, in terms of who you voted for at the top of the list of priorities.
So I put 2 ballots in one envelope. Both of them are disqualified.
That is correct.
Got it. All right. Hey, we've only got a few minutes, but I want to talk about election integrity, because, you know, some people will do things to vote. They'll even move to new places just to vote. I've heard stories.
As a reference, possibly.
As a reference, I've heard of people doing such things. The president says there's a lot of voter fraud, and a lot of us conservatives think there is, but it's really impossible to find out. Is it getting so that we can find out? And how much fraud is there? In other words, how many people are using other people's ballots? I've heard of ballot harvesting. You go to the mail room in your condo and you just pick them all up and then you can vote. I don't know how you catch that.
John, let me talk to you about some of the things we do here in Colorado. We have a process where every single mail ballot that comes in, and that's between 93 to 96% of the votes, comes in the form of returning a mail ballot. Before that mail ballot is counted, that signature is compared to the signatures on file. If there's a question, it's taken to a bipartisan team of judges. That bipartisan team of judges reviews. If they say it does not match, if both of them agree it does not match, that ballot is set aside. The voter is sent a letter saying, voter, your signature did not match. Please provide us proof this is actually yours. Because sometimes your signature can change over time. I know this because my daughter got this letter from me as the clerk. Because when she got her driver's license, she carefully spelled out her whole name. But when she was a college student, it had become a scrawl. So she called me up, said, Dad, you disqualify my ballot. I looked at it.
No accident, honey. I know how you vote.
No, I was hoping to get her vote. I was running for Secretary of State. I needed at least my kids to vote for me. So she responds by providing the copy of her driver's license that the law allows. You can have until 8 days after the election. And so her ballot was able to be counted. We had these go out to a number of people. We had 21,000 instances, John, out of 2.9 million votes in Colorado, in which ballots were not counted because the person did not respond saying it was theirs. Now, those are non-matched signatures, those are ballots without signatures, and those are ballots without the ID for a new voter. In a lot of instances, it's just someone who never bothered to respond. In some of those instances, it was someone who had found ballots in a dumpster or whatever the case may be. But those weren't counted in Colorado because of our processes.
But we'll never know.
What's new?
But we'll never know if it got by the judges. I mean, they have just a few seconds to look. If it looks somewhat close, or if you have somebody's ballot and you approximate their signature, chances are it's going to get through. And there's really no way to check that.
There are some instances, and what happens then when someone says and tries to vote later saying, I never turned this in, then we follow up and can investigate. In fact, in Weld County right now, a former chairman of one of the political parties is being prosecuted because he turned in his wife's ballot, is the allegation. She called up saying, hey, I'd like to get a ballot so I can vote, and they're saying, you've already voted, ma'am. And so there is a process.
This would be what we call an ex-wife who calls up and says this.
So I don't know exactly where in the divorce proceedings they were at the time, but what I do know is there are some ways to catch it. I'm not saying there's a 0% chance. John, there are instances when vote fraud occurs. It's not millions. There are dozens. We've just completed a study here in Colorado where we compared our voting list and our returned ballots to 4 other states. We found, looks like about 48 roughly instances that seem
Questionable.
worthy of investigation by
All right,
law
last
enforcement.
question. People are worried of hacking, that somehow the Russians are going to come in and get to the election system, swing an election. Convince me that's not going to happen in Colorado.
Okay, a couple things you need to know. There is not a single voting machine in the state of Colorado. There is not a single tabulation machine in the state of Colorado that is connected to the internet. So you cannot hack them from Russia. In addition, under the new standards that I've adopted as Secretary of State, there is a paper ballot record for every single vote that's cast. And so even if you were to set off an EMP pulse in an effort to destroy the electronic data, there would be a paper ballot record that's verifiable. And this year, we become one of the first states in the country to add a scientifically based risk limiting audit where we actually compare specific ballots to the machines to make sure they have tabulated them exactly as the voter requested. We take election security very seriously. All 64 of our county clerks work very hard in this area here in Colorado.
All right, got to run.
Thanks for having me
I
on
feel a
today.
little bit better. Thank you. Stay tuned.